Hello, everyone, and welcome to Webinar Wednesday from TLC. We're so excited to have you here. My name is Ria Stark. I am the Digital Engagement Manager here at TLC, and our webinar today is a little bit of a follow-up from our last webinar, if you were able to join us for that. Last time we talked about the 5 successful elements you need for an RFP. Especially when you're writing it. So, give yourself plenty of time, do your homework, talk to your vendors, that kind of thing. If you missed that webinar, you don't necessarily need to have seen that one in order to watch this one. They just kind of go nicely hand in hand. Today, we're going to be talking about an alternative to the RFP process, which would be joining a purchasing cooperative. So before we get started, I do have a poll for everybody, which will jump up on the screen first. We want to know where you're at in your purchasing process today. So purchasing cooperatives are for a lot of different varieties of software. We're specifically looking at your integrated library software system. So are you looking at vendors? Are you currently out to RFP maybe? Have you recently switched? Or maybe no plans? So wherever that is, go ahead and drop that on the poll. We'll give it a second to go. And a few housekeeping things. There are handouts available for you to download today, so please check those out before the end of the session. If you do have any questions, please drop those into the questions panel throughout. We will be answering questions as we go. So as you think of something, please go ahead and drop it in the questions panel. And then we'll also do Q&A at the end if you're paying attention and you maybe missed something and want to circle back. So we'll be there for that as well. So thank you all for answering that poll. It looks like we've got kind of a fairly even split of folks looking and going out, but the majority are not planning to change soon. So good to hear that. But this information will still be valuable in that case regardless. So I'm going to turn this over to David Akers. He is our partner from the Equalis Group, and he's going to walk you through what is a purchasing cooperative and how to get involved in one if that's something you choose to pursue. So David, I'll hand it over to you.
Ria, thank you, and welcome everybody. A little bit about me before we get into the agenda and the purpose of the discussion today. I decided to frame myself as your tour guide today. I hope you don't mind. I think key elements here are, I've been in the cooperative purchasing world, the public sector cooperative purchasing, or sometimes referred to as the GPO, Group Purchasing Organization world, for the better part of 2 decades at this point. I started a GPO called Sourcing Alliance in Cleveland, based out of Cleveland, Ohio, about 17 years ago. And a year and a half ago, wound up merging Sourcing Alliance into an organization based in Texas called Qualis Group. So when it comes to public sector cooperatives, I've played just about every role that you can imagine, from sourcing and membership growth and supplier relationships and contract development and contract management, finance, whatever it is. And as Ria mentioned, we're going to be accepting questions submitted via the chat and responding to those throughout the course of the discussion today. So I would ask, please don't wait until the end. If there's something that's timely that comes up that we're talking about or touching on, I'd love to make this as interactive as we can in the situation where I'm talking and you're typing, but we can still make this very interactive. So with that said, there we go. With that said, you can see what the agenda is for today. And as Ria mentioned, really, part of what we're going to talk about is what is a cooperative, how does it work, and then ultimately get into some more specifics about where that fits as an alternative to running your own bids and your own RFPs. And we're going to talk about the contract that the TLC, what we call the cooperative agreement, or the cooperative master agreement, that TLC was recently awarded after a national competitive process, as an example of a specific contract as we go. So our goal today is to level set, for those of you that aren't familiar with cooperatives, what is a cooperative, how do they work, how do you join one. We're going to spend actually a lot of time talking about how to evaluate cooperatives, because I think that is a key element. There's a lot of cooperatives out there, they're different, and different cooperatives might appeal to different people. And so I want to give you, at least from my background, some of the things that if I were in your shoes, I'd be looking at when I'm considering what cooperatives I may choose to work with, which cooperatives I may choose to work. So that said, let's dig in. And the first thing I'd like to address today is, as public agencies, whether you're political subdivisions, public agencies, K-12s, however you describe it, as public agencies, there are 3 different ways that you are legally allowed to spend taxpayer dollars. And the most common way, item number 1, is running a bid or an RFP or an RFQ or whatever the terminology is for your organization in your part of the country. And if you think about it from a customer, if you're a customer, from a customer perspective, there's a lot of advantages to running your own RFP. You can figure out exactly what it is that you think that you need. You can develop those specifications. You can run that RFP on your time frame, leveraging the normal processes that you follow. And so the idea there, of course, is that you get what you want, exactly what you want. The downside of running RFPs, particularly as I've seen in my career over the last 20 years in this industry, the resources, the staff resources that are available to public entities and to libraries for operational type and administrative type activities like running RFPs and bids, those resources seem to be getting squeezed a little bit. I have yet to come across an organization that has a larger procurement team or contracting team today than they had 5 or 10 years ago. And so there's a time component that's involved. The other challenge that comes up sometimes with running your own RFP is, depending upon the size of your organization, maybe whether smaller or larger, it doesn't really matter. There's a lot of things that you need to buy as an ongoing operating entity, and it's impossible to be an expert in everything. And so one of the concerns that comes up when you're running an RFP is, do you really know what's available to you? Have you had the time, frankly, to be able to invest in learning the particular industry, learning about who all the different players are, how their solutions compare to one another? And an alternative is to go through and in some way, shape, or form hire a consultant as well to help you, but that slows down the process. It also costs money. So there's pros and cons to running your own RFP at the end of the day, and that's just what I want to highlight. The second option, many of you are probably very familiar with what's called typically a state term schedule or a state bid or a state contract. And so you either have to go through your own procurement process if you're spending above whatever your bid threshold dollar amount is, $10,000, $25,000, $50,000 with a particular vendor, or a legal exemption to doing that is to buy through a contract that the state in which you exist, in which you operate, a contract that the state has established. And so again, advantages and disadvantages. The advantage, probably the biggest one, is that, hey, if the state has a contract for the specific products and services that you're looking for from the vendor from whom you want to buy those products and services, well, a state term contract gives you a way to immediately go buy from that vendor. Saves you the time of developing your own RFP and the specifications and then running the bid and going through the contract award process and the contracting process. So there's a lot of advantages to using a state term contract. There are some disadvantages as well. And then the disadvantage side, one, is that state term contracts are generally designed for the state. And so, think about it with police cars. Well, if you want the exact same police car, same color, same configuration that the state is buying for state troopers, then great, you can get that car. But if you want variations, it doesn't work that way. So state term contracts are very much of a one-size-fits-all kind of contract. Another limitation is that sometimes companies, providers of products and services have, let's say, A through K in terms of the breadth of capabilities that they offer. But they may not have A through K in their state term contract. They may only have A through D. And so one of the challenges that comes up is if you buy through a state term contract, you have a vendor that you really like working with, great that you can get A through D, but what about everything else up to K? If that's not part of the state term contract, those products and services, they're available from the company generally, but not under the state term contract, you can't buy from that company where you've established a relationship and confidence in who they are and how they operate. Those other products that are not part of the state term contract aren't available to you. So something to think about in terms of state term contracts. The third option, as you can see up here on the screen, is a cooperative. And cooperatives come in all different shapes and sizes. There's local cooperatives, regional cooperatives, statewide cooperatives, multi-state cooperatives, and national. My organization, Qualis Group, is a national cooperative, which that means that typically the contracts that we have are available to public agencies across the country, including libraries. But the idea of the cooperative, again, there's going to be pros and cons. The idea of the cooperative is that there's a lot of similarities with a state term contract. So cooperatives offer contracts that you can purchase through those contracts without having to go through your bid or RFP process. And so that's, again, it's a big time saver. Now, of course, you still have some of the same questions. Is it the vendor? Do the cooperatives have contracts vendor relationships under contract that are with the vendors that you want to buy from? Do those contracts have the products and services that you want? Is the pricing, is it one size fits all pricing, or is it flexible in that you can get exactly what you need at a price point that makes sense for you? So these are some of the questions that come to mind. But at the end of the day, the level setting that I'm seeking to do here is to just make sure foundationally that it's clear that when it comes to spending the taxpayer dollars for which you are responsible, there's 3 legal ways to do it. You can run your own bids, you can buy through a state term contract, or you can buy through a cooperative contract. The key is that when the state auditor comes knocking on your door, whatever it is, the first quarter after the end of your fiscal year, or whatever the cycle is, that you are legally and appropriately spending taxpayer dollars. You can't get in trouble for it. You're not going to wind up on the front page of the newspaper. You're not going to get bad marks or any findings in your audit. You've got three options of how to go there. I'm going to pause for a second. I don't know if anybody has any questions that they want to submit. Rhea, I'm guessing we don't have any questions in yet.
None in yet, but as a reminder, go ahead and jump into that questions panel if you think of anything, everybody.
Okay, so let's go back to the first one, running your own bid, running your own RFP. And where does a cooperative fit relative to doing the procurement work yourself? And so when a procurement process starts, when you're thinking about, hey, we need to buy something, we have a need, we have an opportunity, and we're going to be making an investment or a purchase of some kind. Typically, you're going to spend time within your organization figuring out what the need is. You'll probably start looking around at what some of the options are that are available to you. And begin developing the scope of what it is that you actually want to buy, that product or that service. And then this is where the divide comes in. If you're doing your own RFP, your own procurement process, that's the left turn here. And if you think about it, it's time that you're going to spend and people in your organization are going to spend really going through that whole procurement process, soliciting proposals, reviewing proposals, identifying who won, going through a contract negotiation process, and so on. So there's a time investment. And any investment of time, by definition, is time spent over here means it's time that you're not spending over there, right? It's an opportunity cost. And so that's one thing to consider. But the other thing I would throw out to you is, again, I mentioned, any organization buys a lot of different products and services. It is highly unlikely that there are going to be people within your organization who are experts in every single type of product and service that you buy. And so that's where the uncertainty and ultimately the doubt comes in. If you're not an expert, particularly in more complex purchases, like the operating systems for libraries, if you're not an expert in what it is, or you don't have experts on your team, well, maybe you hire someone to come in, again, as a consultant. But how do you know that you're developing the scope for the right solution? What if there's other better alternatives out there? And so there's some uncertainty that comes through an RFP process. What if a company comes in and they wind up winning with the lowest and best or the lowest responsive and responsible proposal, but they're not the right company? They don't provide the value that you're looking for, or the scoring process somehow brings to the forefront someone who turns out to be the wrong company, but you're stuck because you went through that RFP process, you followed your steps, and you made the contract award, and that's who you got to go with. So the alternative, and what cooperatives represent, is a straight path. It's a lot less time because someone else has already done that procurement work for you, and they've done it in a way that's compliant with the statutes that apply to you. So you can save a lot on the time piece. But here's the thing that I think is missing. You do a regular art from how most people think about leveraging cooperatives. When you run your own RFP, maybe you talk to some vendors and get some insights ahead of time, but once you publish the RFP, you go into that dark period and you're not allowed to go back and forth. And if a vendor has changes that they'd recommend in the RFP, there's a lot of limitations to that. You can't really have dialogue because we got to maintain a level playing field. One of the fantastic things about using a cooperative agreement is that the supplier partner, I call them supplier partners, the vendors who have cooperative agreements, they're experts in their space. And if you're working with the right cooperative, get connected with that supplier and they can come in and they can help diagnose exactly where you are and then talk to you about what your options are going forward and do demonstrations and show you different alternatives and understand what your strategic objectives are, your timing, the dollars that you have, budget, your budget limitations, and help you. And that's what this sign right here is all about. Help you configure the best solution for you, for where you are now, where you're trying to get to, and whatever limitations you have along the way. And once that configuration process is done, because you're working with a vendor who has a cooperative agreement, you can just go ahead and enter into the contract. You can execute the implementation of whatever solution it is that you configured. And so what the cooperatives do is they offer you not only a faster path to get to the solution, but they also offer the opportunity to ensure that you're getting the absolute best solution for you because you can leverage free consulting from the vendors. So every cooperative, there's some basics. If you play poker, it's table stakes. The first thing that a cooperative brings to the table is compliance and ensuring that you have a legal and appropriate way to spend taxpayer dollars, as I mentioned before. The second thing is, it's kind of like a Walmart or a Sam's Club in concept. No matter how big you are, relative to the 94,000 plus public sector entities in the country, there is no one individual public sector entity, state, local governments, special districts, libraries, K-12s, higher ed, whatever. No one's big compared to 94,000 governments in total. And so part of the value proposition, the assumed value proposition of a public sector cooperative is not only that you've got compliance and not only that you're going to save time, but there's more buying power that's being leveraged with the vendors to get you better pricing than you'd be able to get on your own. So there's a save time and save money component. And that's a big piece of what a cooperative brings to the table. And as I said, from my perspective, this is table stakes for any cooperative. So then the question becomes, what is it that differentiates one cooperative from another? And so as I put these thoughts together, I try to put myself in your shoes. Try to put myself in the shoes of any of the thousands of agencies I've had the good fortune and opportunity to work with over the past 17 plus years. And so what I've highlighted here, and I'm going to spend a few minutes on this slide because I think this is the crux of thinking about, considering working with a cooperative and picking which cooperative or which cooperatives you choose, with whom you choose to engage. So contract award philosophy. And I've highlighted two elements under just a general approach of cooperatives to awarding contracts. There are some cooperatives that are focused solely or almost exclusively on price, your lowest and best, right? That kind of model generally gets focused on price. And I'm not, and price is really important. There's another approach which is focused on what's called total cost of ownership. And so total cost of ownership is not just the price of the product or the service that you're getting, but it's all the other hard dollar and soft time costs that go along with everything from acquiring to implementing to using to servicing to replacing or repairing to that product or service. And so sometimes, I mean, some of you may be old enough to remember the Fram oil filter commercials, right? Pay me now or pay me later. The idea of the Fram oil filter was, yeah, it's a little bit more expensive, but over time it winds up costing you a lot less. And that's what a total cost of ownership or TCO philosophy is. Now, look, what works for you is going to vary. There are some organizations that are very focused on price and have a high sensitivity to budget dollars today. There are other organizations that look at the total cost of ownership over time and are willing to pay a little bit more today because they know that over time, the total cost is going to be lower. So that's one piece that I would encourage you to ask about if you're talking to a cooperative is where do they focus? Is it on value, total cost of ownership, or is it on price, just the upfront cost for products and services? The second piece of contract award philosophies is actually, I was just on a call about 20 minutes ago and I heard a term I hadn't heard before, and that is a philosophy of choice. In a philosophy of choice model, a cooperative will award contracts to any qualifying supplier. So let's say it's office supplies. Today you've got what? You've got, depending where you are in the country, WB Mason, you have Office Depot, you have Staples, you have Amazon. So, and every supplier or a cooperative with a philosophy of choice would say, well, we're going to have some members that want WB, some want Office Depot, some want Amazon, some want Staples. So we want to have contracts with all of them. And if your goal is to be able to choose from a lot of different suppliers, then there are certain cooperatives where that's going to be really helpful for you, where they have this philosophy of choice. The other side of that is a limited award approach or a best supplier approach. Hey, we're going to try and get bids from Amazon, Depot, Mason, and Staples, but we're going to find the best one. And so there are some cooperatives that follow that approach, where they're trying to find the the lowest responsive and responsible supplier, the best supplier for you. So those are two things to consider around contract award philosophies. The contract design philosophy. Some cooperatives will run RFPs with a very narrowly defined scope of services or scope of work. Think of that A to K example that I mentioned earlier. Well, they might very intentionally say, we want A to D. That's all we're looking for. E to K, whatever. We can deal with that with another RFP, another contract award. That would be a more limited approach. Things are very targeted. That may be a good fit for you. On the other side, you've got some cooperatives that say, look, if we award a contract to Office Depot, we don't want just Office Depot's office supplies. We want their janitorial and sanitation supplies. We want their information technology capabilities, their promotional supplies, their lunchroom and break room capabilities. We want our members to be able to buy anything that Office Depot has to offer. So those are two different philosophies. And then the last one under the contract philosophies is pricing flexibility. I mentioned earlier, state term contracts are typically a fixed pricing model, one size fits all pricing. And that works for some people. Other folks say, you know what, we're unique. Our solution, our requirements, and the solution is going to meet our requirements, is going to be different than anybody else. And so we want to be able to have the right solution configured for us and then priced accordingly because we're unique and we're different. So again, two different approaches here. The next one up is member service capabilities. And I think it ties very, very closely with the last one about decision-making tools and the ease of access to different documents that can help you. There are some cooperatives that are, for lack of a better way of saying it, they operate like a self-service buffet. So you join the cooperative and then you get access to all their contracts. Here they are. Here's a list. Here's a website that lists them all. You figure out which contracts you want to use. You work with the different vendors and you figure it all out. And that's one approach. There are others that are more like the 4 or 5 star restaurant, where there are people, individuals at the cooperative who work with members to say, hey, help me understand what you're trying to accomplish. And they ask you some questions, and then they help you pick from that long list of suppliers. They help you, or vendors, they help you pick, well, which are the ones that might be the right ones for you? Where should we make the connections? And then they'll actually make the connection for you or whoever and your team is responsible with the right person at that vendor and make that connection and actually help facilitate figuring out what the right solution is so that at the end of the day, you're getting exactly what you need, no more and no less, and you're paying exactly the right price for it. So member services can be minimal or they can be concierge or anywhere in between. And depending upon what's important to you, asking questions or evaluating the member service capabilities of a cooperative is something I strongly encourage you to do. The last piece is, particularly because we're in the public sector, you should have, and you should reasonably expect to have, access to all the related documents around a contract: the original RFP, the proof of publication, the proposals that were submitted, the bid tabulations, the final agreements that were entered into. Sometimes folks just want to know that they're there. Other times folks want to dig in and read through all that stuff. It doesn't matter which your preference is. The question is, how easy is it to get the kinds of information, the backup documentation, descriptions of the products and services that are available, summaries of the procurement processes that you can take to your board of directors when you're making a whether it's a 5-figure, 6-figure, 7-figure purchase, so that your board of directors knows that you are buying through a legitimate, properly procured, competitively solicited agreement. Are those tools available to you? Are they easily accessible? So again, as I step back and I was putting myself in your shoes, thinking about this conversation today, these are the kinds of things that I've heard from public agencies of all different types all over the country, things that they think about and things that they consider when they talk about what they like about cooperatives or what they dislike about cooperatives. It often boils down to the list of things that you see on the screen primarily. Maria, I don't see you, so I'm guessing that means that we still do not have any questions. I just covered a lot, by the way, so I'm going to pause for about 10 seconds just in case somebody is in the process of typing a question.
Absolutely. I'll jump in real quick too. As I was thinking about the original poll we did up at the beginning of the webinar, we had, the majority of folks on this call aren't necessarily looking at new vendors right now. So maybe you could speak to what is the benefit that they could get out of a purchasing cooperative now, even though they're not necessarily searching.
Oh, fabulous. I appreciate the question, Maria. So I think there's a few different things. One is, by the way, joining a cooperative, it's just funny, the audience today, we always refer to it as being very much like getting a library card. When you have a library card, that gives you access to what's in the library and the ability to take out when you want to, what you want to take out, of course, assuming it's still there. The same thing is, with joining a cooperative, if there's a cooperative that you find that has contract, you like some of the things I've got on the screen now about them, it never hurts to get that membership piece out of the way so that when the time comes that you're interested in a particular type of product or service, you already have access to it. So that's one piece, just to process, get out of the way. I think the most important thing that a cooperative offers at any point in time, whether you're in the market for something or not, is access to information about things either that you are looking for now or that you might be looking for in the future. So let's say, for example, you're working on a 5-year capital plan and you're putting a budget together. Well, you're not in the market today for new roofing or new HVAC units. But if you want to get some information about, well, hey, 3 years from now, I know that I'm going to need 45,000 square feet of new roofing in whatever type of roof it is, a cooperative can help you get that information for budgeting purposes. And they can go to their different vendors and say, hey, here's the size of opportunity. Can you give me an idea of what it is that this member should put in their capital budget 3 years from now? So that would be probably, I think, the most effective use of a cooperative would be around budgeting and education.
Yeah, definitely get ahead of it.
Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about Equalis. The Qualis Group is the cooperative that I'm a part of which I'm a part. And as I mentioned, merged the cooperative that I started 17 years ago into Equalis last year. And in our world, we view what we do. If you think about saving you and your team time and money while keeping you legal, what's the point of saving an organization time and money? And the point of it is to free up resources, human resources and financial resources that you can then reinvest in fulfilling your mission and fulfilling your purpose. So doing that, that's what our purpose is. And we built our organization around that philosophy. And so then, okay, David, you talked about there's lots of different cooperatives out there. What makes Qualis Group different? And I would say that what makes us different is this, what you see in the very first line, member-driven, supplier-centric. Member-driven. We've built our organization and our approach around what we believe, having engaged with thousands of members and people in all different roles in those members over the years, what we've heard that most folks want. And so when we talk about these items, we have very definitive answers to how we've approached every one of these bullet points. And it's built around what we've been told and we've asked what's important to our members. And so that member driven, we source contracts that our members tell us they want. The reason why we sourced a contract that ultimately was awarded to TLC is because one of our members, a school district in Texas, said, we need to solve for this category, for this type of software and systems for all the different libraries in their various different school buildings. And so we worked with them to build out an RFP and a set of specifications that met their needs, but that were broad enough that they could meet other organizations' needs as well that might be slightly different. So that's the member-driven piece. Supplier-centric is part of our answers. We are not an award every supplier who responds type of approach, the cooperative of choice. We are very much a cooperative that focuses on, we're going to find the best supplier. We may have more than one in a category. Typically, they're not overlapping like this. Maybe they overlap a little bit, but our belief is that we're going to go out and do what you do. You don't go out and find 10 different roofers. You find one to do the job. That's how most public agencies operate. And so that gives us the ability to pick the best suppliers and then work very closely with those suppliers and help make sure that those suppliers are meeting the needs of each of our individual members. And so that's what we mean by member-driven, supplier-centric. And a huge piece of that is something I mentioned earlier, in that our suppliers have expertise to bring to the table so that you don't have to go out and pay for that expertise. And they can help you get the right solutions. And by picking the best supplier, we have the highest degree of confidence that they're going to work with you to provide the right solution for you. How does that play out? We bring compliance to the table. As I mentioned, that's table stakes for everybody. We did go with a total cost of ownership approach. And again, it's not that the price you're paying for whatever, Cherry Coke Zero, is the absolute lowest cost to you today, but we're going for the lowest total cost of ownership. A big part of what we do is we ensure that not only do we, as much as possible, we have all the products and services a supplier offers under contract so that if you want it, you can get it. But we also design our contracts in terms of exactly what you're buying and the pricing associated with that, that they're configurable. So you're getting exactly the solution that you need at the right price for you, leveraging the buying power, but it's not one size fits all pricing. It's one size fits you pricing. And then the last area where I believe that we distinguish ourselves is the member support. And the member support is providing, and I'll show you a slide just as an example. We have dedicated points of contact across the country and are continuing to grow this team so that you're not calling an 800 number and asking for, hey, can I talk to somebody who's knowledgeable about X? You're actually calling Nancy or Derek or Keith or Stephanie or other folks who we're bringing onto our team. So you have a single person you can call, and their job is to help you find the right supplier, help make that connection for you, help you navigate that relationship and get what you need, help step in if there's a problem. You have a single point of contact. Now they have backups, of course, but that's a part of our commitment to the service that we bring to our members. We also, and I'll show you in a second, we make sure that you've got easy access to the documentation that you need and easy access to other decision-making tools that can help you and others within your organization and ultimately your board of directors, if you have one, or whoever the oversight group is. Help everybody along the way have the information that they need access to be able to make the decisions that they want to make. And that's a big part of what we focus on in terms of member service. So TLC in particular, I mentioned that we had a member, school district in Texas, that was looking for a solution in the operating system software space. And so we developed an RFP, and the entity that issued the RFP is Region 10 Education Service Center. It's in the DFW, the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And so what I've just summarized for you here is when the RFP was published, what we called it, key information about contract dates, and the contract number. So we went through the whole process such that if you're in the market and you want to buy a solution from TLC, since they're an awarded supplier, an awarded vendor, you can leverage the RFP process and the contract award that we did to be able to buy from them right away, if and when you so choose to do that. In the contract resources, this slide deck, we've PDF'd it. It's going to be available to everybody after the call. And what I've done in here is I've put in links. I'm going to show you some of these quickly, but I've put in links to a whole series of different contract resources that are readily available to you. You don't have to ask us for them. We've provided them. That's part of our commitment to transparency and our commitment to ensuring that you have access to the tools and documentation that you need. So if you were to go, and I'm going to pull this up on the screen, if you were to go to equalisgroup.org on our homepage, there's a little bit here. There's a document right here that's an overview about Equalis, and it's really focused on our procurement process and how we keep our contracts legal so that we keep you legal if you decide to buy from one of our suppliers, awarded suppliers, without conducting your own RFP. That's all right here. And we have, if you click on contracts and solicitations, you'll come up to a page that lists all the different contract awards that we have. It's alphabetical. You can also sort by categories. But you'll see, for example, that we have a landing page, and it's a single page that has everything that you need all in one place for the Library Corporation. So if we clicked on that, here's a landing page, and there's some information here about what you can buy through the contract, and a little bit about the Library Corporation as well. Most importantly, over here, we have key information about the contract itself, and we have direct links to all these different documents related to both the RFP and the contract award, and actually what we call the master agreement, the final document that is what you can leverage, the RFP that we did and this master agreement that we entered into, to be able to purchase from TLC directly if you wanted to. So all this information is right here. You don't have to search for it, it's right there. We have a document right here, contract overview, and it pulls on a front back. It's a one pager. The first page is a lot about what we just looked at on the landing page. So this is something that can be circulated internally, emailed to folks within your organization. On the back page, there's a little bit about Qualis Group right here. And remember I mentioned earlier, sure, you can go through your own process from soup to nuts and running your own RFP and develop what you think is the best solution. Or you can leverage a cooperative agreement, leverage the expertise of the good folks at any one of our supplier partners, for example, TLC, to configure the best solution for you and then implement it. Rhea, I see you up. Do we have a question from someone?
No, I just want to mention that everything that David you're sharing right now is available in our handouts as well. So the overview of Equalis, the link to this one pager are all of those handouts. So if you're interested, download those now.
Perfect, thank you. The other piece, and we designed this one specifically for the approval, whoever's making approvals. If you're an independent library, the board of directors, or if you're part of a school system, whatever the chain of command is, this contract confirmation letter. And it is a piece that's designed to just clearly demonstrate in black and white, not as a marketing piece, more of like a memo. Hey, there was a public agency, Region 10, issued an RFP with this title on this date, awarded a contract to, in this case, TLC is the lowest responsive and responsible bidder, and then entered into a contract. And here's some of the information about the contract. Here's where we can find all those things I just showed you on the landing page, all the information transparently available to you. Here's who's eligible to buy through this contract. If you're not a member yet, how to become a member. If we've got questions. So all this does, and we actually saw this. We had a suburb of Akron, Ohio, that there was a heating, ventilation, air conditioning contract that had gone to city council. And one of the 7 council members, candidly, was giving the service director a little bit of a hard time and asking a whole bunch of questions. And basically, how do we know that we can buy through this contract without going to bid? And we got a recording, a streaming recording of the council meeting. And so we were watching it, and we saw her get up at one point and go hand out a sheet of paper to all the members of city council. And we couldn't see what it was. And then the camera operator zoomed in. And what she did is she handed out this document. Because I've heard the council member, and I'm not challenging the council member, he was doing his job. He wanted to make sure that they were properly spending the city's taxpayers' dollars. And she handed out this sheet of paper, and then after that, there was a vote, and the award of that business for well over $1 million in HVAC work was approved by council. And that's what this document is designed to do, is to help answer some of the questions that within that decision-making process in your organization, when no one from TLC or Qualis Group is around, but there's questions that are coming like, how do we know that we can make this purchase? That's what this document is designed to solve for. So these are some of the types of capabilities and documents and resources that we make available to you. The last thing, and then I'll be wrapping up, but the last thing is joining Equalis Group. If you'd like to join Equalis Group, you're not already a member, we'd love to have you. And it doesn't cost anything. There's no dues, there's no obligations. You can cancel at any time. Again, it's kind of like getting a library card. It only takes a couple minutes to join. I've got links here to the membership page and then a membership FAQ. Literally, all you do is type in your organization name, address, phone number, website, your name, title, phone number, email address, check the box and click submit, and you've joined Equalis. Once you've joined, you'll receive an immediate email confirmation. And so if you ever get an email confirmation and you didn't join, that means somebody did it for you. Let us know. We want you to join, not someone else. But you'll receive a membership kit and a membership number within a couple days. And as soon as you join, you have immediate access to the TLC contract and the entire contract portfolio that we have. So again, the whole idea here today is to say there's different ways that you can legally spend taxpayer dollars. Cooperatives are one of them. There are certainly advantages and disadvantages to going through your own RFP process versus leveraging an already procured contract from a cooperative. We wanted to make sure that we highlighted that there are differences between cooperatives, and there are, whether structurally or philosophically. And so I'd encourage you to find a cooperative that matches up with your philosophy, because there's all different types. I walked you through as an example how Equalis has approached some of those questions about breadth of supplier awards and flexibility in pricing and total cost of ownership versus lowest price as examples, so you know that. And then I wanted to show you what some of those tools are that I believe you should expect from a cooperative to help you make informed decisions, to provide resources, people resources, as well as electronic, to help navigate through a portfolio of contracts and help get you to what it is that's best for your organization in the most efficient and efficacious way. So that's what I've got, Ria, for today. I'm going to stop again and see if there's any questions that have been entered or if you have any you'd like to pose to me.
Yeah, absolutely. That was so great and so informative. I know when I worked in the public library space, we knew about RFPs, but didn't necessarily know about purchasing cooperatives. So it's great to be able to kind of get that alternative. So a couple of things for our audience. Please go ahead and add your questions to the questions panel. We do have one more poll for you that will launch on your screen in just a moment. And this poll is going to ask you if you would like a follow-up from TLC to talk about library software options, different purchasing cooperatives that we're part of. We have been awarded a few different options this year. So if that's something you're interested in, please hit that yes, contact me button and someone will reach out to you following the webinar. So sometimes it's nice to get all of your shareholders, stakeholders in the same room to be able to have those options that aren't on your webinar. If that's the case, hit that button. We'll be happy to talk through it for them. So while that is going on, David, I do have a question for you. So say I'm a library and I took that left turn heading to RFP land. I'm down that road and I just found out about purchasing cooperatives. What do I do? Is it too late to hit that U-turn?
Well, no, it's not. I mean, certainly that's there's practical and there's political, right? So if the expectation of the governing body, if you're an independent library or the school district is, we do RFPs because we do RFPs, we made that commitment, then okay, politically that may not work. What I can tell you though is you're the customer, and as a customer, it's your right at any time to pull an RFP and to go in a different direction. And I would say that there are times I've seen this, Ria, actually I'm thinking about a situation with a library in particular, copiers. It was copiers. I don't know if you've ever worked with copier salesmen and saleswomen. They're fairly aggressive. And so, the library was getting calls from a ton of different copier companies and had gone through this process with us around configuring a solution. And theirs is very unique. They were dealing with coin operations and who's collecting coins and all kinds of different stuff, and copiers to the public and copiers behind the counter. And they really wanted to go with our awarded supplier. And so but they were concerned. Hey, we're going to keep getting these phone calls. What do we say? So what we did is we wrote them an email that anytime they got an email that came in, that they could just send out. They didn't have to think about it, they didn't have to write it. It was just copy and paste in a reply that basically said, hey, that's political subdivision in Ohio, blah, blah, blah. We have multiple ways we can spend dollars, and we're using this approach, and we're authorized to do so statutorily, and that's what we're doing. So thank you very much for your interest, but we've already made a decision. And of course, there are a couple of folks who are still pretty aggressive about it. And the email wasn't enough. And so what I told them was, I said, look, just redirect any of those calls that come in from someone who's upset that they didn't get a quote unquote chance to compete, redirect them to us. we'll answer the questions, because what we can do is we can talk about the competitive process that we went through and
Mhm.
demonstrate that they in fact did have an opportunity to compete, and for many times had competed and
Mhm.
lost. So
Yeah.
we'll help on that political and that PR and that communication side, because depending upon how aggressive certain vendors are, sometimes they can just be, a bit of a pain in the butt factor. And the key is that it's legal. What you're doing is legal, it's appropriate, it's actually authorized by state law in all 50 states, and we'll help head those kinds of questions off.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the great parts about having a purchasing cooperative is because vendors, like TLC, we're still responding to bids, but now we're responding to them at that purchasing cooperative level. And that's how we get awarded through that rather than directly through the library. Although we, of course, we still do that too. Um,
Right.
yeah. So I'm not seeing any other questions. I think you explained this very well, very thoroughly. And of course, we'll be sending out follow-up emails. This is recorded. It's always available the next day at tlcdelivers.com/webinars. So be sure to check that out. And David, thank you so much. I think that this was absolutely valuable. Oh yes, to go into our last slide.
There we
There's
go.
our web address. Thanks.
Sure.
um, so we'll hang out for just a second to give you a chance to download those handouts because once we end it, you won't be able to have access to them, but we'll provide them tomorrow with those recordings. And of course, we'll have the slide deck, which has direct links over to the Equalis website. If you ever have any questions, please reach out to TLC. We're always available to help talk about that. And I feel like I have to say, we're not sponsored by Coke Cherry Zero, but looks tasty.
All right, here, I'll switch to water and I won't show the logo. There we go.
No, you're fine. It's too funny. Well, perfect. Well, again, thank you so much, David. We'll go ahead and end it
Sure.
here. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you on the next one.
Thanks, Rhea. Thanks, Justin. Thanks, everybody who's here. I appreciate it. Take care.